Are you talking good about our conference room?
Well, we're now live.
Huh?
It's 8:30 and the conference is supposed to start, so we have to get to those calling in.
Wow.
All I really care about is getting myself a dang Krispy Kreme donut. That's really, this morning, man, I'm gonna enjoy that Krispy Kreme donut. Right, Bill?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I like that.
I think we're going to have to probably, we may have to go find some more chairs.
I'll go find more chairs.
You know, when we have our rain delay, actually it's a traffic delay.
Rain delay?
We play football, you know, when you have a football game and you have a storm
Well,
overhead.
this is one thing, you know, you get a little rain delay, you hang on for a little while and
We're gonna have a similar traffic delay. Bruce is running late. And
You got it.
others called and said they're held up in traffic.
well, we got to let everybody know who's coming in now that we are going to delay. So if you've tuned in, we're here. Remember that time we did the live streaming?
Hey, how you doing? Didn't get a chance to meet you. Yeah, it's good to meet you. Is your intern?
Yeah, it's like a fellowship.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. Some broadband stuff. This part is more of like an education aspect of it, so they kind of have like their own agenda and homework to do, and do your own stuff for the county. Okay. Broadband, so getting to the point within beginning of next week, I'll probably dive into some other stuff like the program has for me so far. So should be exciting.
Yeah. I want to
Kelly, do you dial 9 to get out?
Excuse me?
Do we dial 9 or 8 when you get out?
Yeah, I have a slide. I'm just
Do you dial here?
talk about what I'm doing.
I don't really see that. That is not.
GIS and then also communications.
Just dial the number.
A strong communication between
I think you have to do it
what the county's finding in terms of fiber assets and being back over here to those stakeholders and then also we communicate.
Okay. Yeah, like features or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we definitely want to make it collaborative.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you'll have your contact information, I want to keep in touch with you.
Yeah, I don't think orders yet. I should get sent those and things.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have, it's gonna write down.
Alright, yeah.
If you are the host, please enter your PIN followed by the pound or hash. If you do not know, thank you. There is one host and 6 participants in this conference.
Down there.
Please remember that.
Hi, this is Bill Simmons. We're gonna start in probably 5 minutes. We have a traffic delay and a number of folks have called and said that they're on their way and we're gonna. I hate her. So there's a bunch of you on the phone, but I'm just letting you know we're gonna probably hold off for another 5 minutes while people get in off the 101. You guys were smart today to call in. So I'm gonna mute you, but we'll be right back
Shortly.
shortly.
Watch it. So they can go online.
Yeah, and then there is, I think I sent you a link that,
YouTube/TV.
how you'll be able to stream it, so feel free to dial in. Bob's got his camera up and running, you can see us getting organized here, so just stay tuned. You got 6 people on there, that's amazing. There's more people online than there is calling in.
Good morning.
Morning.
Accident right out here. So
Is there?
It's causing traffic.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's right out here. You can see it. Yeah.
Morning, sir. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
A comedy of errors between not having a key until late and an accident that shows up. I mean, this is one of those days where there's a disruption in the force.
Yeah, said it's connected.
Jory,
Morning, everyone.
you made it.
I did. Got an accident on the freeway.
Yeah.
CHP was involved.
In the accident or?
They were, yeah, I'm sorry, right front quarter panel gone.
Did it come up there?
Oh, I see you brought all my favorites again.
I got a new coupon for Krispy Kreme. Buy a dozen, get a dozen free.
Oh, pretty good. 5 days
I got 2 dozen for $20. Wait for 2 more minutes, we'll start 8:35.
The traffic's very bad coming from Russian Road.
Yeah.
Morning.
Actually, both sides of the freeway are.
It almost feels like it's worse from that side, even though the accident's on the northbound.
Yeah, their car stopped on. Even though it's on the north.
Morning.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Got your email? Ooh.
Did you pull up the stream, Alan?
Yeah.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Looks like you.
You're on camera, Bill. You are the star, man. What we'll do, we'll stop it and.
You're the delay there. That's funny. That's probably an 8 or 10 second delay.
Well, by the way, that's why we're here, to cut it down to a 1 second delay.
The broadband, that's the whole point of
Broadband, it's the whole idea of it. I'll keep quiet.
That might not be the intro.
That's good.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You made it through the traffic.
Yeah, I went a roundabout way, but got me here on time. It was like,
Okay.
What I'm gonna do, just before you wanna start it, I wanna stop it and restart it as if we're starting from scratch.
Will that change the buffering at all, or?
No, so I don't have to do any editing.
Okay. It's
So-
probably a good time to do. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I don't wanna have to wait until.
You ready to go?
I think so. I don't want people to.
When I give you your,
In action. I don't wanna keep people waiting, but for those people that have just arrived here, first off, those of you on the phone, please mute your phones unless you're asking questions, because we will get some feedback and a delay through the streaming that's happening. So we appreciate it if you, we'll go and do introductions, but then after that, please mute your phones. We've had a number of folks that have arrived just a few minutes ago, and we keep hearing about the traffic accident that's out on the 101. We know that there's others on their way in, but I guess this accident occurred just right there where the Flynn Road on-ramp, off-ramp is, and it's causing all kinds of problems on both sides of the 101, and so we expect that that's contributing to late arrivals. And so with that, starting this all off, I would like to go around and do introductions, and then we'll dive into the agenda and get started. So I'm Bill Simmons, I'm coordinator of the consortium. Sasha?
I'm Sasha Burrows. I'm gonna be a fellow with AmeriCorps and CiviSpark for the next 11 months, working with the County of Ventura and also Bill with the consortium.
Good morning, Alan Yeager from the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Fort Wayne.
George Amendola, telecommunications entrepreneur.
Stephen Sawyer with Spectrum Communications.
Cesar Perez with Impulsive Mass Communications.
Kevin Pasasa, City of Oxnard.
Troy Wolf, Magellan Advisory.
And on the phone, let's start there, and I think that when I dialed in, there was 6, maybe 7 people. Why don't we try to figure out who's on the phone? Hader, I know you logged on.
Yes, Hader, I want to put it down now.
Bill, this is Steve Carr, a former CTO that's in the president.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Sure.
Brian Shaw over at Moore Park. We've taken out, unfortunately, about 9 o'clock for another meeting.
Yes, thanks for the heads up, Brian. I got your email about that.
Gil Deming with Spectrum.
Hi, Gil. Thanks for joining us.
Jim Butterfield at the County of Santa Barbara.
Jen, thanks for joining us.
This is Steve Wildguard with Ridge Communications.
Okay, Steve. And there was one other?
Hi, good morning, Bill. This is Bob Petrolke. I'm with SurfNet Vice President of Engineering at SurfNet and distributed to the Monterey County Broadband Consortium.
Good, great. Thanks for joining us, Bob. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh,
Bob Allen from KDTV and Municipal Broadband.
Terry Howard from Municipal Broadband.
okay. So we certainly have a quorum. I know Bruce Stensley's on his way, but he gave a text that his traffic was impacted, and so he'll be coming in just a minute or two. Also had a few other RSVPs that I will assume we're gonna either jump on the phone or walk in the door anytime. So, in terms of the agenda today, let me see if I can advance this. I want to talk a few minutes about our priority areas, just a very few minutes. I want to provide regional summit updates. We'll talk about the event and what we're doing, where we're at in the planning. Would like to introduce you to Sasha and let him tell you a little bit about what he's doing, and we'll all get to know him better and provide feedback. I want to talk a little bit about the follow-on. But between priority areas and regional summits updates, I'd like to maybe modify the agenda some and talk about what Oxnard's doing, talk about, enjoy some of the stuff we've been talking about related to regionalization. I might even want Brian, you to go first, since we're gonna lose you in another 15 or 20 minutes, to talk about where you're at, anything that might, any updates you might have related to Moore Park. But you know, having the municipalities here and talking about what you guys are doing is very important, and will be a standing item in future agendas. So with that, let me run ahead and talk about priority areas. This is why we're in business. CPUC pays us to tackle the priority areas. And what we've been doing is relying on these maps as we drill down into each of the various cities to drive the conversations in the cities. We've had conversations with Santa Paula and a number of other. Simi Valley is coming up in the next month or so, where I put out notices to the providers and anybody interested in getting time with city staff and talking about the services and understanding needs and gaps and those kinds of things. We're trying to foster that dialogue. And so I'm at your disposal. Put me to work when it makes sense for each of you cities as part of your plan to be able to communicate with the providers that are here as it relates to the city plan. As I say, I've been coordinating. I have 3 dates for Simi Valley. I'll be sending out emails to everybody that may want to participate in this. So we'll be wanting to convene meetings probably after the summit, latter part of October, the city of Simi Valley. And anybody that is in the broadband business as a provider is certainly welcome to take advantage of that. We tend to talk to 5 or 6 companies in the course of a half a day. So that's where that's at. We're going to be moving as well, doing the same up north, and that's going to be happening quite a bit as well in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be doing details of that in the next meeting. So I've got somebody working up in the Santa Maria area, putting together requirements with those cities as well as talking to somebody this afternoon about San Luis Obispo and San Luis Obispo County. So we're taking this model and moving it on up the coast in the next 2 counties.
Bill, quick question.
Sure.
The priority areas, are they the 6 down, 1 up?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the minimum. What would that look like? Any idea if it was the 25 and?
I don't know, and it was, Jory stepped out, but I was in a meeting with Oxnard yesterday, and he was talking about the fact that, you know, the world is expecting gigabit service now, and yet the standard for the federal is 25.3. Yeah.
Which is still.
And then I'm sitting there saying, well, 25.3, that's, I mean, that's for, if you're out of California. If you're in California, it's your 6, 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it's really, this is 6, 1.5. This is the fit to the California standard for the California Public Utilities Commission. It would look completely different at 25.3. Completely different. I mean, a lot of those areas would go red fast, I imagine.
Would it be interesting to imagine that, you know, for purposes of discussion? You know?
I don't know how you collect the data. I mean, that would be very interesting to find out. I mean, this data is reported to CPUC as part of the regulatory process.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I'm thinking of the business.
Right now, the question goes out, who meets the 6, 1.5 level, and that's what's reported. You know, I don't know if the state of California would ask who makes the.
I'm thinking of the business areas, you know, that obviously that's a business development highlight for, you know, for the cities in doing business development in the future. So in the business zones, it would be really interesting to see what the comparisons are. And maybe there's a way to do that with some of the stuff we're getting from the carriers. That, see, the CPUC uses these census blocks, which I think is a nice idea. I'm not sure what it buys you. Right. But on the business side, and that's, you know, a lot of us in this room, a lot of the interested parties are interested in that part of this, and if there's some way we could find that out, that would be really good. Maybe Steve Blum could help, you know, because he was the person that, you know, kind of helped a couple of years ago, remember, when we put things together?
Yep.
So I'm sure those questions he's having to answer up in the north, San Jose, you know, et cetera. And it's important to Oxnard.
Yep.
It's important to all of us. Yeah.
Well, the Connect America Fund.
Yes.
If we're able to demonstrate some of that, it seems that with some of the rural investments by the Connect America Fund, that we're going to be behind the curve as a metropolitan community. So it would be interesting to see if we can make some kind of correlation.
This data has an overlay of the Connect America Fund. It already goes into it.
With the minimum California standards.
Right. Yeah.
But the federal standards are.
Yeah.
A lot higher.
Bruce.
If you wanna be on camera, you sit over there. If
You
don't,
know?
sit over there.
You always.
I personally want to be right in the middle of that.
Absolutely.
Did you have a traffic report?
Yeah, it sucks.
You're on the camera.
See, if we had more broadband, you would have to be in your car.
You know, we'd have fewer cars, we'd have all those problems solved.
Yeah.
So they say, sorry.
So I feel obligated to put the priority areas up at the very front of our meetings because that's what we're paid to do. But from this point on, the discussion gets to the enabling and strategic aspects of regional discussions. And so, you know, that we've paid the bills and reported to you what CPUC wants us to do, we can get into, you know, what we're interested in doing, and that's really coming up with a regional posture, a regional approach. And so,
absolutely.
Let me start with Kevin, and you know, maybe you can talk about where you're at in the process. Let's drop to the phone after that with Brian, and see before we lose him. And then I'd like to kind of have Jory talk about where he's at in the big scheme of things with you and Ventura, and some of the conversations we've had recently now with Brian Ganley.
Sure.
So, you had a big day yesterday.
Yeah, we did. So we did part of the phase of our plan is community engagement, and we had open invitations for community anchors and businesses to come to the city and talk about their disposition towards broadband. So we had about 30 businesses represented, which was good. You know, again, just a lot of this
as we're finding, probably those in cities know, just getting the community to be active, engaged, and getting business people to take time out of their day during the workday to come and come to our office, you know, for a meeting. We actually felt very good about the turnout. I think we had a lot of good feedback. It was a pretty active room. I think, you know, we all agreed that we had a lot of participation from pretty much everyone that was there. And it's just also, I mean, stuff we've all heard, but the need, I mean, just, we had folks from agriculture talking about how broadband is going to impact their business. Production, for example, you know, just with the impact of minimum wage hikes, they're moving to automation in production and processing, food processing. So all the machines that are gonna be doing that are all online. They're all remotely managed, monitored, and serviced by, you know, firms, even overseas. So there's a high need for broadband in that aspect of agriculture, which impacts Oxnard quite a bit. Just even interesting, just we had a car dealership, representative from a car dealership there, and from a Ford and Lincoln dealership, and Lincoln's requiring everybody in the dealership to have a tablet to walk around and be able to talk with the customer at any point and show online content about that vehicle. So the amount, and forget about software updates to the vehicles that come into the shop. You know, right now, this dealership said that they ask customers to go do that at home because they don't have adequate throughput in the dealership to run that. It takes them 2 hours to run a full software update, and they're doing this to every vehicle that comes in for service. So it's very interesting the kind of things that are going on. You hear about, it's like I didn't even think about aspects of that. And this guy was saying, and you know, the tech manuals, everything they do is online now. And even for Oxnard, all of the servicing that our guys are doing on our own vehicles, all that stuff has all been moved to the cloud. So there's no more paper manuals. So just very interesting hearing about, you know, from businesses of all walks of life, the need for broadband. And we had one business that said that they're going to have to move, hopefully within the city, but they don't have adequate broadband where they are. And it's come to that point where they've got to make a decision. You know, it's great hearing that direct feedback. And so right now we've had our community engagement meetings, and we had kind of the deep dive with all the Oxnard departments. This was the business engagement phase, and now from here we're continuing with our survey, which is kind of also driving the same results. The business survey, broadband assessment, or disposition survey, so that's running. And then we're still moving on. We've got all our assets in GIS, or we're almost there. So we started to add in a lot of the market data, which is gonna help us look to where we are gonna expand. So a lot of the foundational work has really been progressing pretty well, especially in the GIS count. Again, we talked about it, but we had started, you know, 9 months ago with taking paper PDFs from our design build vendor. Don't ask about that, it's our point, but getting that stuff digitized and in our GIS, you know, put the layers. We're looking at streetlights, all vertical assets, you know, pavement condition index and all our zoning areas, and a bunch of things we're getting in to really have a granular look at where we go. So a lot of good work going on, but I, you know, can't say enough, I think, about the community engagement and getting buy-in from the community, you know, all over in all walks of life. The last thing I'll say too is that even the business community brought up that the social aspect is so very important. They were asking, yes, you know, the mayor wants to focus on economic development and businesses, and that's our plan really is focusing on those areas. But even the business people were saying, well, what about schools and education? You know, they're the future generation, and what are we doing in our plan to care for that community? The businesses were saying that. So that has come up in every discussion we've had with everyone, is what are we doing to help schools and bridge that digital divide with the disadvantaged community that we have. You know, we had our CIO of the Oxnard school system there, and the kids have tablets and so on, but they can't bring them home because they don't have broadband at home to do their homework. So, you know, we've got to solve that problem, whether it's, you know, in homework zones or community areas or parks where we can get broadband so that we can help these kids do that. And there's no question that addressing those needs is going to help us get this through council. It's not going to be just economic development, it's going to be that, but if you answer the social question as well too, and that's what we're going to look to do, and I think that's going to help us be successful.
I was, in our session, we had somebody there that was running nurseries, and they had the app where they can change diapers and report on the contents of the diaper and then notify the parents about the fact that their child has been changed. And, you know, and that's just part of the nursery business for childcare. And when you think about, you know, as fundamental of a business as you have, and yet it's all internet enabled and cloud-based, it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Gartner says 2 million new devices connect every day.
Yeah.
In the US. That's probably low.
John Proctor has joined us, and we're just kind of going through, I don't want to put you on the spot, and we're going to let Brian Chong talk, but Kevin just reported from Oxnard, and Brian, we're going to ask him to report on Moore Park. If there's a couple of nuggets that you just want to share from the Santa Paula perspective, your timing was impeccable.
Oh, great. Yeah, for some reason, I got a notice that this had been changed to 9 o'clock, so.
Really?
Yeah, somehow, but
So you
I
were
have
early.
no idea how that happened.
That's right. Good story.
You know, this newfangled computer stuff, you know, online.
Let Brian report, and you can get a donut.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Brian, are you still with us?
I'm still here. I just wanted to share a couple of status updates. Our committee did meet, the ad hoc committee of 2 council members, the scope of which is to develop a city's RFP for a broadband study. We had some policy decisions to make, the idea being the more you want to include in the study, the longer it will take, the more expensive it gets, so it's kind of, you know, focus on what it is. The policy direction we got to draft the RFP is to focus on the commercial areas of the city, not on the residential areas. In contrast to Oxnard, we have a much newer community, and you know, we have less of an issue of the lack of availability of service. The discussion about, I know Steve is there, but Spectrum's ability to deliver to all residential customers gigabit service, not cheap, but it is available. That weighed heavily on the discussion. So our RFP is going to focus on someone to look at the commercial areas of the city. The other thing that they said was we are not interested in getting directly into the business of providing the infrastructure for broadband. We don't have the existing conduit nor the fiber that Oxnard has, that some other cities have, and we're not interested in getting into that market. The final thing was that they did want to include 5G readiness in the scope of work. We feel that we're actually doing a pretty good job. We're already engaged with several providers, the big telecoms, to you know, to draft our agreements. We're actively working on that, but we thought ultimately it was a good idea to have someone, an expert in the field, take a look at what we're doing and either validate it or tell us what we can do better, because that never hurts to do. So timing-wise, we are drafting the RFP and about 20–25% of the way through it right now, and then we're taking it back to the committee as a fully, you know, drafted, ready to go RFP. If they accept it as is, we can actually release it within a day or so. If they have some minor tinkering that they want, then we'll, you know, make those adjustments and then send it out. So definitely this year, hopefully next month, we'll have the RFP out. I know Jory, if you're still there, you're on our list of people that receive that RFP, as well as several other companies. And if anyone else wants to make sure they get a copy of that, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure you get it.
Also, as a follow-up to a discussion we had at one of the meetings that we connected at last, I do have the Westlake RFP if you're still interested in looking at that.
Yes, absolutely. That would be most helpful.
Okay.
And actually, the study too, the result, if that's available.
Yeah, some of that's not quite in the public domain yet. I've had some issues in obtaining the information, but I do have something I can share that'll help you with your RFP preparation process. Also, I'll shoot you over some other RFPs from other cities in the Southland that also will be helpful.
That's much appreciated.
Before we jump to John, Hader, do you want to add anything from a Thousand Oaks perspective?
If I have time, no.
Okay.
I know that the Business Roundtable, which is elected by the council, they focus on the broadband and Wi-Fi access, especially to some residents who are doing home activation or home business. So eventually, I'll come around and meet with you, Bill, and just figure out where the dark areas are and what the city can do regarding, the providers and how we can help.
Sure.
The other discussion is yesterday we talked about, or on Tuesday we talked about the city buying Edison's streetlights. And we can use that for, basically, everybody's talking about smart city, and that's one of the discussions internally we're talking about. If we buy all Edison streetlights, we'll be able to control the future of internet access throughout the city. So slowly we're talking about it. We'll see where we go with that.
Okay. Thank you. John?
Yeah, well, I don't have nearly as extensive as an update. We're more in our infancy here, but what we've been doing so far, working with Bill, helping us out. Just to give you a little background, and I think most of you are aware because we've talked about it, we're going to be having a provider named Digital West coming into a new development of 1,500 residential homes. And on the east end of Santa Paula is called Harvest at Ventura. And one of my biggest concerns has been not creating the proverbial digital divide between the new part of the city and the old part of the city. Jumping forward, we have done interviews with 4 different providers just to see what their offerings were. At this point, just as of last night, I put on a future agenda item for our ad hoc committee, which is just me and one other council member, to give a report along with Bill on our progress so that we can talk about what initiatives we might want to pursue. Part of this too is we've gotten some information on mapping of the current I'm sorry, I'm fiber. And for some reason I have a hard time with that. I'm an old cable guy, I guess. And so we've been looking at that, and the next step is really to bring it forward to the council so they can be aware of it, and maybe we can come up with some options. Also, I think we may have a presentation from Digital West to let us know what they're planning on for what we call East Area 1 or Harvest at Ventura. So that's about it, and that's our presentation will be mid-October to the council.
So we've queued John up to be one of our speakers at the summit on October 11th, and what we're thrilled that he's a councilman, and really to show the leadership above the staff level, and we're grateful for it. And Ned Davis did that a year ago, and he was an out-of-towner that we brought in from Westlake's perspective, and we're great to have him as an ally. But John's going to carry the flag this year, and for those council folks that we're able to get, he's going to be queued up to say, "I've got spirit. How about you?" And try to develop that leadership aspect that we're looking for from each of the municipalities. So it's great when staff takes the initiative and does it. But we want to give you all the top cover we can possibly get in terms of vision and leadership and support to what you got to do. So.
Well, you have to give them a nudge because this is not always on the top of the list. I mean, we have people screaming about potholes and things like that. And so to look forward to something like this, you do have to give them kind of a nudge. But I have to say our staff has been, and city manager have been very receptive.
So, with that, Jory, you want to try to put a bow around a lot of this, and maybe talk a little bit about the South Coast group that you'd worked with, maybe as a benchmark or a best practice that we might want to consider a year from now or at some point, in terms of where these conversations go. It's kind of a direction.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. For those of you who don't know me, before joining Magellan Advisors, I was the CIO for the city of Santa Monica for 22 years, and I have 39 years of experience in public sector IT. Been working with a large number of cities in California mostly, or other places around the country, and looking at different models that might fit for each city. So it's a tailor-made consultancy for helping put together master plans, wireless procedure plans, working on policy initiatives around Big Ones, wireless ordinance, agreements and master license agreements. Of course, in the strategic plans, we also include smart city. So we do a thorough evaluation through interviews with all the department heads and their key staff on where cameras are going to be going in the future for public safety, where traffic cameras are going to be going in intersections for traffic management, where Wi-Fi is needed in parks for free internet access, for digital inclusion, where we would need Wi-Fi and wired connections for intelligent transportation, sensors, real-time parking systems, and other smart city initiatives. And so cities throughout California are looking at various business models. Most of them are looking at models where they own the assets and they hire a third-party partner or third-party partners through a competitive process, RFP, and select them to lease out their fiber to businesses and to anchor institutions, typically. Some cities, Manhattan Beach, Rancho Cucamonga, and a number of others, are looking at a residential market and bypassing the business and the anchors because of the dissatisfaction that's taking place within their residential community. But again, most of the cities, and I'm talking about 35 or so cities that I've been working with so far in the last 2 years since I left Santa Monica, are looking at broadband for business and anchors for economic development, and along the way, strategically planning for smart city. The entrance of 5G is providing an opportunity for cities that do own poles. Many cities don't, but for those that opted in to buy Southern California Edison poles through the program that expired in 2015, or had poles already of their own, are leveraging their poles, and we're assisting them with policy and negotiations under NDA with Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, and T-Mobile, along with some other players, intermediaries such as Crown Castle, Extenet, and Mobility, to leverage those poles and weave those poles into their smart city and their broadband master plans. Reason being, at least until, well, we'll find out what happens on September 25th at the FCC level, when they're taking a vote on national legislation that would preempt the compensation that we are currently getting for streetlight poles, for small cell attachments, like what we saw in SB 649. That was not signed by the governor last October. We are able to negotiate with these carriers and get in-kind. So for example, in Carlsbad, California, we set a rate of $2,200 for small cell attachment per pole. Crown Castle, on behalf of T-Mobile, was wanting to lease 110 poles. They had previously leased 50 poles. They were paying the city $58 a year per small cell attachment and giving them one strand of fiber at each pole. And the fiber wasn't connected to anything, interconnected, and so it was not an operational network. The city attorney asked us to participate. We did. We negotiated lowering the cash demand from $2,200 to $1,500 per pole per year, and obtained 6 strands of fiber throughout 92% of the city. The city then is going to connect 51 of their city facilities and abandon the use of an AT&T V-MAN system that they're paying $750,000 a year for, which is very unreliable. And in many cases, it's 100 meg, some of it's 1 gig, some of it's 10 gig, and they're going to go immediately to a 10 gig network and save all that money ongoing. Crown Castle's back, so that's just, and they want more. That's just one example. We're doing the same thing in Santa Ana, in Huntington Beach, in Inglewood, California, Culver City, West Hollywood, the Bay Area in San Leandro, and Concord, and Vallejo, and Hayward. And we're assisting these cities in creating these wireless ordinances, these master license agreements, and the dig once. So cities currently can leverage their poles for in-kind for the small cell attachment. If you don't own poles, and of course if you do own poles, there's a second opportunity to negotiate for in-kind, and that's when they're coming back for the subsequent encroachment permit. All of these carriers need to be in the ground because they need to install fiber to backhaul the wireless. So wherever they're gonna put a small cell, they're gonna have to connect that small cell via fiber. When they do the encroachment permit, with conduit and fiber in the ground, it's at that time, if you have a day-once policy, that cities are negotiating for joint trench and either obtaining conduit for free, obtaining conduit for an incremental cost. And the incremental cost is typically 1/3 of what it would cost the city if they were to do this on their own. So these opportunities exist. The legislation that's being voted on at the FCC on September 25th may eliminate or may reduce what cities can do for small cell, but it does not touch what cities can do for encroachment activity, for backhauling the wireless with fiber. So cities, and it sounds like Moore Park is following in that same direction. Oxnard and Ventura are also going in that direction. Hayward just signed up for some more activity, negotiate Santa Ana. We're trying a new approach, which is quite interesting, and that's asking all the carriers under NDA to give us information over the next 3 years about their small cell activity. Where within the city are all their small cells gonna go, where their existing fiber footprint is, and where their fiber footprint is going to expand over time. In return, the cities that are following this model are providing moratorium schedules for the pavement management systems to maintain their PMI, pavement management index. They all do street repaving and surfacing and the like, and sometimes it's reconstruction. And at that point in time, of course, typically cities are gonna implement a 5 to 6 year moratorium. Every time you cut the street, you decrease its life by half. So to protect the public right of way, the public's investment in that asset, it's important that cities create a schedule. And in creating the schedule and communicating the schedule through a day-once practice as part of the policy, they organize and they can manage all the activity in the public right of way. That doesn't mean you can't enter it. It just means that if you're gonna do it after a period of time where it's still in a moratorium state, that your restoration is going to be more onerous than otherwise had you done it before the moratorium was put into place. And that restoration may be anything from beyond a T-cut to a half a lane or a full lane, or even a full street repaving, to put it back to its original condition after it was completed and put into moratorium state. So these are all opportunities that cities have, and these are the kinds of models that cities are following. And Ventura and Oxnard are kind of going in this direction. It sounds like Moore Park is going in this direction. The many cities in the county and the county itself are interested in requiring streetlight poles. Obviously, streetlight poles, as I mentioned, provide revenue opportunities, but it also provides for local control, net neutrality, and other kinds of things. What you use the poles for, most importantly, are things like implementing smart city applications. And as cities were to attempt to lease circuits for all the thousands of IP-enabled smart city devices that are gonna end up going out there on poles, they can't afford it, they'll go bankrupt. Which means they won't implement smart city, and that's not gonna be good for cities across this country. So this is a time for cities to wake up and leverage their poles and to allow for managed access by others to their poles, but get a fair return through a partnership rather than just trying to be a regulator. What happens when cities try to be a regulator? They take their rights away from us, right? That's what's happening. SB 649 was gonna do that, and now it's happening at the FCC level. So we're encouraging our clients not to go for the cash, but to go for the in-kind. They can't take the in-kind away from you. And even though the vote at the FCC on the 25th is gonna remove the grandfather clause where SB 649 did not allow in-kind is in-kind. Once you own it, you own it. And so we're encouraging all of our clients, and they're all racing sort of toward the edge for that date to get as much in-kind as they possibly can. In Santa Ana now, since we can see 3 years in advance from Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Crown Castle, and Sprint, we can negotiate not just on 1 pole or 10 poles, but that are coming in incrementally. But we can see T-Mobile's gonna put in 170 poles over the next 3 years, Verizon putting in 150, AT&T slotted for 225, Crown Castle's putting in about another 300 for Sprint. That's a lot of activity. So you're all probably also familiar with what happened in San Jose. And San Jose said, let's do a coordinated approach. So this is very much like what they did in San Jose. And they negotiated for a long-term 5-year picture with all the carriers and said, let's do this in an organized fashion. Not only did they get in-kind conduit and fiber from the carriers, but they also got resources to process the permits on the activities, because this is going to be a drain on staff. And this is going to be a drain on all municipalities throughout the country as 5G gets rolled out. There is not a device out there yet that communicates on 5G. The iPhone 10 will not talk 5G. Actually, there's just nothing out there yet. So it's still got about a 2 to a 2.5 year horizon. But now is the time to start planning for this, and the cities are doing that up and down. More importantly, many cities are finding value, as Bill had introduced this topic, are finding value in regionalizing, value in collaborating and pulling together networks, especially when they don't have the resources at their disposal. They don't have fiber in the ground. Typically, cities have fiber. Fiber comes from conduit that's in the ground, typically for traffic signal systems. That's where it all starts. You need copper to connect the traffic signals, otherwise they're just standalone signals, and you can't synchronize them, you can't manage them, you can't change their timing unless you go out to the traffic signal control box on the street, plug in a laptop to the controller, and then you change your signal timing sheets. So traffic signal people have been networking traffic signals for the last 25 years. So most cities have conduit and they've got copper. Many cities have already modernized, pulled out the copper and pulled in fiber. But for cities that don't have that, take for example the South Bay, or take for example large swaths of land like the county of Ventura, and you don't have fiber assets in the ground to connect all these cities, you look for third-party partners. And like I said earlier, most of our cities are not looking to own and operate these fiber networks anyway. These master plans are calling for a public-private partner so that the city will own it and the partner will operate it. Or it's going to be an open network and the city will own it and there will be multiple operators. The city of Santa Clarita, for example, we worked with them. They've got an IRU with Wilcon. Wilcon actually was American Dark Fiber, bought by Wilcon. Wilcon bought by Crown Castle, and Crown Castle now is leasing dark fiber strands from the city of Santa Clarita for economic development. Santa Clarita is now, we're helping them connect their network to 2 internet points of presence, one in El Segundo and at Equinox, and the other one at Point Welshire in downtown Los Angeles. Now they're going to be able to backhaul, pull in the wholesale broadband into the community, and they're going to be looking for other partners to lease more fiber, and these partners will be operationalizing the fiber, marketing it, and managing it for businesses for economic development. The city continues to maintain the fiber for itself, and they can then use it for smart city applications and other government innovations. The city of La Mesa, California, we're working with, we just issued an RFP, and the RFP is saying they just pulled in a 72 count bundle and a 144 count bundle. The 72 count bundle gets dedicated for city applications, and the 144, we have the RFP out looking for a P3, public-private partnership, and the public-private partner or partners will operationalize the 144 count for economic development, connecting businesses and anchors, and helping the city implement smart city applications. So back to regionalism. We we did a workforce development and job retention study for the South Bay. This was a study which was sponsored and paid for by the South Bay Workforce Investment Board. And Chris Cagle and Jan Vogel, the leaders there, they worked with the South Bay Coalition of Governments, 15 cities in the South Bay, so you probably know of them: Hawthorne, Torrance, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, Inglewood, Carson, and many others, and all the Rolling Hills estates on the peninsula. And they were looking for ways in which to improve economic development, because they were afraid Toyota went to Texas. What's going to happen next? They've done a lot of large warehouses. What's going to happen with these empty warehouses? Where are the jobs going? They're all going to the Inland Empire. And they're worried and concerned that the well-off and upper middle class neighborhoods are going to start to decay because there aren't going to be any local jobs. The people that are living close by will not have a workforce and will not have, be able to maintain their businesses in the region. So to keep the region alive, they banded together and said, okay, it looks like broadband is going to be a catalyst for economic development. Broadband is the solution for us to create jobs, for us to create a new workforce. It's good for job retention, it's good for keeping companies, and it's definitely good for growth. And we got some additional money from Mark Ridley Thomas's office, District 3 County Board of Supervisors, and his office has funded the RFP process. We had 17 bidders at the bidders conference interested in providing their own network, again, because the cities didn't have any assets of their own, and maintaining that network and operationalizing it, marketing it, connecting all the city halls first, then all the other city facilities next, and then connecting businesses and anchors. And every time a business or an anchor gets connected, the South Bay COG and Workforce Investment Board gets 1% of the proceeds, and those proceeds go back into a JPA, and the JPA continues to allow the cities to work collectively to do regional broadband and smart city activities. So we, that vision came out of the work that we did on the workforce development and job retention study. And so far, we can't prove that it's actually creating jobs or retaining jobs because it's not finished yet. But we did, out of the 17 interested parties, we got 4 well developed responses from 4 very competitive companies. And guess who was included in that board? Spectrum. Spectrum was interested as well. We had Frontier at the table, we had CenturyLink, we had a number of new entrants. But the idea here, like all the other cities, is that the entrenched providers aren't investing. We need to find other investors. We need to attract them by allowing them to use our assets, monetize those assets, give us a share, give the municipalities a share of those proceeds, and then take those proceeds and continue to expand the network for more economic development, connecting businesses and interests along the way. So
So one of the takeaways from that model or an approach similar to that, in discussions with John in Santa Paula, you've got what you're doing with Ventura and Oxnard. I think it's important that the small cities also participate, and so when you get to critical decisions in creating a regional approach, anything that we as a consortium can do to bring and to maintain communication to the smaller cities to be part of the regional plan, we want to help you make, and that includes streetlights. If there's a data call where you're building this regional coalition in dealing with Edison, if there's small cities that also may want to be part of that conversation. One of the recommendations John's committee will provide to the council is to stay plugged into the regional discussion. And so I just think this is a connection we need to maintain. And you're working for two cities, but we want to bring the forces of all cities to participate as well.
Jory, I had a question for you.
Sure.
AB 1999, I sent you a copy. Have you heard any updates on that? Governor signed it?
No.
Not going to?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
But not yet.
So that's the state authorization for cities and counties to proceed with broadband.
It's one of the 3 net neutrality bills that went before the state. So for your benefit, I just asked one of my GIS people to throw this together. We maintain maps of various service providers throughout the country and their networks. And so what you see here is, of course, the county of Ventura, but also plotted on this map. I just wanted to show you if you think you don't have the assets internally, or if we even don't have the assets to interconnect the cities into a cooperative regional loop like we're doing in the South Bay. There are networks that will. So here, for example, in this beige color you see here is the Crown Castle network, and in this blue chartreuse, whatever you want to call it, is the Southern California Edison network. And if you look closely, you'll see that Southern California Edison and Crown Castle are both very strong candidates for interconnecting all of the cities, well, most of the cities in Ventura County, creating a regional loop for everyone to share. And just like in Santa Clarita and all these other regional kinds of efforts, we would connect this loop back to 2 internet points of presence for dual route. So you would have a commercial network. You would all share in backhauling that broadband at wholesale rates, and you would have the opportunity to select any number of ISPs that you're going to get out of Equinox and out of One Wilshire, so that you can now start getting competitive broadband rather than relying on Spectrum or relying on Frontier, which are miserable service providers, as we all know, and continue to hear. So I just wanted to leave you with that there is promise, an opportunity out there to create a regional system for the county of Ventura as well.
Jory, this is fantastic. I've continually said the concern I have here is everything is going to One Wilshire. I'm trying to drive a thought train on getting an undersea cable brought into Wanini or somewhere so we can have some alt routes. We've all experienced our earthquakes. No telling, because the big growth was between earthquakes, no telling what might happen on the routes down to One Wilshire.
Yeah.
And so we're continuing to try to drive that with the committee here with Bill and yourself, but.
Okay, I have some experience with cable landings. We just negotiated on behalf of the city of Hermosa Beach 4 new cable landings.
Oh, wonderful.
Actually, we just finished that project 2 months ago. So they're here.
Yeah.
I don't know about servicing this area. They're in our study. I'll have to bring. I can pull out that map.
I looked at Global Crossing, what they had there, and that's CenturyLink now, and talked to the CenturyLink guys, and they have desire to do something here if there's interest in the community. Mm-hmm. And Frank isn't here, but Frank's been driving that. Frank Saraceno has been driving that. So I really think if we all sit back and think about what resiliency here, if we're going to spend all this millions, billions, why not have total resiliency?
I can tell you, maybe we don't need to get too much into the weeds on this, but all these companies are looking for land which belongs to a city with very little bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. They don't want to deal with large counties or large bureaucracies. They want to get this done quickly because time is money. These ships are just incredible with these rooms that are 4 times the size of this one with these spooled cables.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
They've got 20 of these rooms. Anyway, there's It's about $1 million of revenue to start, and about $900,000 to $950,000 of revenue recurring every year that can come from that. So there's obviously the benefits of having alternate paths, but there's also the revenue as well.
Continuing conversations, big thoughts. I want to switch the gears now and at least cover two more topics, one being the summit and the next and then introduce you to Sasha. October 11th is our summit. It's coming up fast. It'll be before our next meeting. We've got all the speakers confirmed. We're partnering with the Transportation Commission. They're intending to kick it off with a greeting. He's our Transportation Commission coordinator, head, executive director, I guess, and the chairman of the commission, Linda Parks, will then have her comments, and Jackie Irwin, who spoke at our last one, will provide some comments as well. I assume you're coordinating with her office in terms of how that's going to come together. Mike Pettit will have a conference call with speakers probably, if not next week, the week after. So he's going to be in that same role as a Toastmaster. I've reached out to each of these, confirmed the topics with each of the speakers. Somebody from Caltrans talking about the infrastructure required for smart vehicles. Somebody from Contra Costa County in their Transportation Commission talking about what they're doing as a region, and they're being put forth as the best practice. And then we'll be breaking in the second half of the morning, we'll be making it local. It will really be taking this regional conversation and focusing in on the next evolution. I think we queued it up pretty well last year and wrapped it up in terms of getting municipalities engaged. We want to take that to the next level this year. Jory will be talking about the regional interests and some of what you've already heard. He'll be wanting to pass that message on. He's got 2 cities that are working with him. We'd like to be able to foster that connection with the other 8 as well, just to help that regional discussion occur. And that'll be one of the outcomes that we're hoping to facilitate in the dialogue. We're excited about Louis Fox, the president and CEO of Scenic, coming down and talking about the service they provide in terms of connecting schools. And the County Office of Education works with Scenic, and a number of providers work with Scenic for the connections to the schools, and we're going to take full advantage of his presence in talking about why this is a special region and how we need to really have him focus on what we can do, working with him and Scenic as a place to prototype new ideas and innovations as it relates to partnerships. I mentioned John in terms of keeping it local, and then Mike and Bruce will, if time allowed. There wasn't a lot of time last year.
It's good, I'll hold next cake.
And then they'll wrap it up at that point and invite everybody that's not part of this group to come in and join this group and be part of that ongoing conversation. So that's what it's looking like for the 11th. It's going to be a big day, a lot of great speakers. It's coming together. Mike Pettit always does a nice job, framing it and keeping it moving. And so I'm looking forward to another session very much like last year, except the next step.
For those who couldn't make it, we are going to live stream it also, and it'll be available for viewing right afterwards.
We'll be reaching out to, I assume, Mike Powers and the city managers, and trying to, obviously from an IT perspective, IT staff, planning departments maybe, public works, any of the staff people that would benefit from understanding this conversation, we want to invite them to be there, but political folks as well. It really, our agenda is to really gear it towards municipalities, those people that work there, those people that are showing leadership there, because we need you to be able to work this vision, and to all be working together in this direction. That's the critical mass that we're trying to achieve. Okay, that's my update for that. Sasha, why don't you introduce yourself? Yes, go ahead.
This is Steve Carr. I just wanted to remind you to make sure we reach out to school districts and educational institutions to attend this as well, because I think there are so many overlaps and cross connections here that we want to make sure they're in the loop on this as well. So I just think that audience also needs to be included in this.
Good point. And they would appreciate your advocacy, Steve. I think that's a good role for you. You need to keep reminders of that.
I'll be happy to reach out to Julie and to the other CTOs and CIOs to make sure they're involved in these conversations and invited to be part of this. So I'll be happy to do that.
That's great. Okay. Thank you. Sasha?
I'm Sasha Burrows, as I said earlier. I graduated from University of Oregon in June in environmental studies major. And I was looking for jobs, and I saw Civic Spark, which is a AmeriCorps program, basically overall trying to increase sustainability of cities and create effective communication, resiliency, and more. So essentially what I'm going to be doing for the next 11 months is working with Bill, Bruce, and Brian Ganley in Ventura County, and working between the consortium and the county on both mapping and also communications. So just to hit each point real quick, I'm going to be working in GIS, trying to find broadband adoption data, and that could include looking at current infrastructure or pre-existing infrastructure as well, and then also being able to communicate and compile that data and bring it back to the consortium for a different set of clients or whoever it's going to be providing it to. And then also possibly tying in some sort of creating a form of social media or using pre-existing social media to either communicate to the consortium or as well the community on broadband efforts and issues. And then also one project I will be working on is trying to create a way to display all the assets that I find, and again, all back to communication, bringing that back to the consortium as well.
So Bruce ran across the Civic Spark program some time ago. We went through, we interviewed a number of folks. We selected Sasha. He's unique in that he was born and raised in, not maybe born, but raised in Thousand Oaks.
Yeah.
You were born in what country?
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Yeah. So his name is Alexander, but Ukrainian, Sasha is your Ukrainian name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's also sort of cool about this is the Civic Spark program is statewide as described, and there are a couple of your peers in regions similar to ours around the state, also with people doing a similar project in collaboration with a broadband consortium. So that'll give us some access and means to understand or learn from other regions doing similar activity as well. So very cool.
I've leaned on him pretty hard so far in that Civic Spark wants to have this engagement severable in 11 months. And you know, and from a business perspective, I'm saying, hey, I'm spending 11 months with you, and you are going to stick around. You know, but yet they kind of say, well, it's time to go back to school and get your master's degree. Well, it's kind of no, we want you to be integral and indispensable in terms of what we're trying to do and to create this situation where once he's here for that period of time, it'd be very in his interest to stay here because he loves being here. So that's kind of the dynamic that we've got. The programming, you can describe it better than I. They have entrance criteria where there are certain projects in 11 months, you've got to clean your desk.
Yeah, essentially it's mostly an educational thing, so they really encourage you going to get your master's or doing some other program afterwards. And it's really all about creating communications and building networks and stuff like that. So it's more of a, from the Civic Spark point of view, they see it as a personal development advantage more than, so I think it can be easy to feel like they're giving me things to do while you want to focus on having me work on other things, which will come soon. I think by the end of next week, I should be able to move on to a lot more specific projects other than just writing up reports and creating assessments, gap assessments for Civic Spark. But
it's an incredibly rigorous and well-organized program, both nationally and as AmeriCorps nationally branded as Civic Spark, partnership with the governor's office and the local government commission giving us structure. So we love that we have that structure, but yeah, there'll be a little give and take. Very cool.
Yeah, so his compensation is half funded by Consortium, the other half by the county.
What is the objective of Civic Spark? What are they trying to build?
I think essentially using the fellows to create connections that CivSpark can then use in the future to also allow fellows to go and work for, and then to essentially collect all the data that we, or not data, but everything that we've worked on in 11 months, report back to them. We have like a graduation and a whole presentation to them in front of all our peers, and then to use that information to the state's advantage, letting people know of what all different agencies and businesses and towns, cities, what everybody's doing in California for sustainability and resiliency.
So maybe create a pipeline between students and the municipalities and the state government. Okay.
And also help with best practices. You know,
absolutely,
yeah. It's fun. We came in there with two very discrete projects. I said, I need help coordinating. And so I did that. I know what that looks like. And so we also want them to work with the GIS area. You know, and we know what that looks like. You know, when you're talking about dig once and you're talking about a lot of the stuff we've talked about, the maps, we really need to put some resources behind that and make it into something, especially thinking about regionalization, you know. So those are two different projects and could use that help. He has to also then come up with a third project. And it's like, well, I see you guys doing this, but if you thought about doing that and coming in as an innovation component.
Yeah, so it's a great win-win, right?
Yeah.
They get the pipeline and the immersion into a real problems that are existing, and the municipalities or the organizations get the skills of a young person with a fresh perspective.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
It'll be interesting. So, let's keep moving, and then we'll go around the table. Just wanted to mention, I don't want to spend any time because we don't have any time to spend on it right now, is the whole idea about our grant is going to expire in January. I'm going to be talking to the boss about maybe extending that and working with CPUC to give us a few more months beyond that because there's some carryover from last year that's available.
And we'll be applying for new money.
Yes, we will be.
As soon as they give us some direction on how to go about doing it.
But I'm envisioning in terms of where that proposal's going is obviously continuing the priority areas, this whole regional network discussion. I think that we have a role in terms of continuing that dialogue. The technology piece, I think that what you're talking about with light poles, I mean, there's gonna be all kinds of technologies that we're going to want to be champions for and coordinate among municipalities with. And I think that's gonna be an aspect that we're gonna look at. Policy obviously as well. But typically, we've done this twice now, going after these kinds of funds. I asked to put a question out for anybody that wants to be a red team, to help with the proposal development. Typically I'll go ahead and write it, but then I'll take the comments and reviews and feedback and have others as well. And so if you're interested in doing that, let me know. And typically 5, 7, 9, whoever wants to do that, I welcome your participation. And Greg, I think you were on the last one with us 2 years ago. And so I'm gonna lean on you again. But anybody else that wants to be part of that, you're certainly welcome to as well. Let's go around the table and then I think we'll call it a day in terms of our meeting. Any updates?
I don't have an update, but I was especially struck by the map Jory shared a moment ago in the discussion around regional opportunities. We've had that discussion in a variety of manners over the last couple of years, and we're a little stuck in how to move it forward. So you mentioned in the South Bay area that it was their Council of Governments that drove this. There is a Ventura Council of Governments. John, are you involved at all? I mean, it's not a particularly robust group. Would that be a fair statement?
I'll be careful about that.
Yeah.
No, actually, I have to say that it has been evolving a bit. And
could this be
like,
a VCOG?
Yeah, I'm on VCOG.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I have a meeting this afternoon. This is the first of 5. I'm going to the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance here. I have to leave in a minute. But No, they've been seeking out, topics to present on that are pertinent to everyone in the county, which, and this is certainly one, and then the idea is to take those back to their respective councils. But it's been in the past sort of an organization in search of a mission, but it's evolving, I have to say.
But we would be thrilled from an EDC point of view. I'm sure the Transportation Commission is already at the table, as we saw when we got this agenda for October 11th. There's a city managers group that meets. So I think we need to chat again about how we try and link those particular moments of regional engagement and make this a simple feature for them.
What is that group called?
Ventura Council of Governments, COG, which is, in any given county you'll have one, but in many counties they're combined with the Transportation Commission. As a matter of fact, we're one of the few, I believe Orange County has an OCOG and their Transportation Commission, but most of Southern California, it's integrated into one.
And they vary dramatically. So San Luis seems to have a particularly robust presence. You don't hear as much, say, in Santa Barbara or Ventura about local COG. But it is at least one vehicle, or at least one convening, let's call it, that might help advance the agenda.
You know, they have a couple of real mandates, and that has to do with regional housing needs assessment and also a regional waste management plan. But beyond that, it's sort of, they have to find other things to do, so to speak.
Sure. Anyway.
Well, in the South Bay, it was instrumental to have the COG together. They arranged for me to attend as many lunches with the city managers as we thought necessary. So we had 4 lunches over the course of about 6 months. So I attended their normal lunches and made presentations and talked and asked questions. We also used that group to inform the city managers to do the bidding on behalf of the COG and the LIB. So when we needed resolutions passed by council for support in going out with the RFP, for cooperative procurement and contracting, things of that sort, it was very helpful to have that happen at such a high level within each of the organizations. And there were 15 of them, so it's, you know, more like herding cats when you've got that many in the room, but and maybe you don't have as many here, well, pretty close to it, but it is helpful. But I think, I mean, not mandates, but areas that I think of our concern besides this particular regionalism topic is that a number of the cities have voiced an interest in reopening the Southern California Edison Pole Acquisition Program. And I don't know if they are even aware of this. And we were just speaking of it last night with Keith Brooks and Kevin Sausage from Oxnard. And I know we've been talking about it with Greg Diaz and Tim Kuhl at the city of Ventura. And we talked to Brian about it at the county, Brian Ganley, as I know. And all 3 of those parties, and we know there are other interested parties that want to sign up. And the first thing we'd like to do is petition Edison, but we'd like to have some strength in numbers. And so we're going to be reaching out probably within the next week to ask and get participation in passing resolutions of support in petitioning Edison to reopen the program. So there's already something on the table.
I already advocated for that with our public works director some time ago, and I'm sorry to say I have not followed up. I already, when you started to bring that up in your presentation, I made a note to check back on what the status is of that.
Okay. So you'll be hearing from, I mean, if you can pass that on in some way, and if we need to make a presentation to get the ball rolling, we'd be more than happy to do that.
That might be a good thing. Once again, the VCOG, is that what you were talking about, or individual cities involved?
Or it could be the city managers meeting. City managers meet on a monthly basis. It's probably the most expedient way to get their attention.
Sort of the Star Chamber.
Why don't you go in that room? You might
No, they do. They interact very well.
Jory, would Edison require a petition to reconsider?
We might even have to go as far as the eminent domain.
Does anyone just have a conversation with them, just to, test the water?
They've been brushed off on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they got other problems.
Alan, any updates?
Just a quick update, we hosted a technology-based forum out at the Naval Base last month, end of August, and we're planning our next one for 28 November, Wednesday, and so that'll be sort of loosely around this idea of technology and new technologies focused on in-service engineering, but relates to a lot of the same topics here. So if anyone's interested, happy to share some information on that. That's all.
George?
A couple of comments. About a week ago, I took the Ventura survey put out by Magellan. Tim at the last city council meeting reported about 459 respondents have participated so far. I thought the survey was, a pretty broad brushstroke. I thought it was a good mechanism to collect some relevant data. The thing which I thought was very interesting is they actually had a question, what are you paying for right now? And what speeds are you expecting with part of your plan? And then there was a speed test, real time. So I think that will be very relevant. My speed test came in a very negative portrayal of what I'm paying for. So that was very interesting to see that. And so that's the comment about the Magellan and the Ventura City. Regarding the previous slide, I observed that you had a section there related to policy. And a comment would be that maybe this group could help set the policy for raising that standard within the state of California. I think there's enough stakeholders participating. There's enough data being gathered from the multiple cities. There is a political will, it seems, within these counties, and there's also access to the state assembly folks to maybe apply a little pressure. So just a comment.
I love how you think. That's great, let's get it started. We got to put it out there. Sorry.
I had 3 days down at the wireless show downtown Los Angeles. I can only tell you that there were hundreds of vendors I've never heard of. The main characters had booths, $1 million booths. 5G was the theme everywhere. Lots of demonstrations, lots of devices being demonstrated, not available, as Joy pointed out. But what I wanted to mention was there were a couple of participants there that had booths that I didn't expect to be there. One was the state of Texas, and it was a large booth, and they were posing all kinds of questions to the crowd. They had the governor of the state who was there the day I was there, just coincidentally, Abbott. So they obviously spent some money on that. But the one I really wanted to share with you was the one that they had from Homeland Defense. It was quite a big booth. I mean, someone signed a lot of budget for it. Had a chance to talk to them about why they were there and what they hoped to achieve and how the participants could benefit from them. And what I came to find out was a grant program that people don't seem to be participating in. And I got all the details of that. I wanted to share with you the documentation and the cards that I got, because they're very interested in Ventura County because of the base. And they claim there's significant funding, both budgeted and to be had, to upgrade the facilities to protect this base. And they're just not seeing, the action that they'd like to see. That's one. But the more interesting one is that I ran into a friend of mine in their booth. So they had like sub booths of people that they have contracts with, and that was with Hughes Research over in Malibu. And this is a PhD level guy, and his wife and my wife are friends, but I never really talked business before because he doesn't talk very much. But the short of it is, turns out he's director of a program that's funded by General Motors to work with cities on trying to develop best practices for cars with no drivers. And I invited him to come to our forum and have a chance to look at this gentleman. And I said we're open to collaboration with Hughes Research. I assume they are?
Yes.
They're right down the corner, and it's something that he and his team hadn't thought about reaching out yet, but they're ready. So I thought that was pretty cool, and wanted to share it with you. So there's a lot of people in the think tank here, but circling around the 5G, you know, wow. It reminds me of the pre-Y2K days with all the vendors. It was craziness. So everyone's gearing up for this. I know your company is.
So I really appreciate this conversation that we're all having. And I guess the Monday missives I've started sending out to you guys. Terry, I appreciate the articles you've sent and the leads that you provided. And anytime things come up that you want to get out, let me know. And I'll make sure that, come Monday, if you've got a Homeland Defense contact or website or there's grant opportunities, let's get that information out there and let's let everybody have it. And, I want to just make sure that it's not, we don't meet once a month, but it's an ongoing conversation and trying to do whatever we can do to share data in between. Thank you.
Forgive my tardiness, everybody. I'm sorry for that. I was recently contacted by somebody in Somas who shared how aggravating and disappointing their internet service was, and I turned him on to GeoLinks.
Is that Gunner?
No, Abiram Karmi.
Oh, somebody else.
Yeah. So I don't remember seeing Somas in our underserved.
It was originally, and then for some reason it fell out, so I'm not sure why.
No one lives in Somas anymore.
I'll tell my friend that.
I've actually worked on a couple of individual, the guy who owns a nursery out there. And we ended up erecting a 50-foot pole for him so that he would have a view to the mountain, because there is service on the mountain from Sky River.
The line of sight thing was a problem for him.
Right, so what we did was we put a 50-foot pole in, he went out and bought a pole and put a receiver on it. Works great.
But I have heard others talking to GeoLinks.
Yeah, I wonder, yeah.
This was news to him. Yeah, it just happened recently, so we'll see.
You will, yeah.
It was out of digging 80-foot trench in his backyard and trying to go get connected into some thing you tap into or something. It seemed a little hinky to me, but whatever means to an end.
Yeah, the problem with Somas is, that there's DSL out there, but everything's too far from the central office, so that's gonna get speeds that are terrible, so.
That's great. Steve?
I'm good. I have nothing. Thank you very much for all the information.
Cesar?
No updates. We have a meeting with the city of Oxnard later today.
Anything to add, Kevin?
Just on the streetlight count, I didn't really address that earlier, but I guess any other cities that want to have that conversation, we are looking to get a group together in the county and kind of start the conversation with Edison. We thought, letter of intent first, just going through the official nice request to Edison would be a good approach. If we get a no, that's fine. We can say we've done it. We've had multiple cities sign on to the effort with our nice ask, and then we can start from there. We just want to get the ball moving with a step forward. As Jory mentioned, obviously we're seeing it. We miss that window. We have a lot of vertical assets in terms of poles, about 9,000 poles. We'd like to see what we can do there. Done some work on just the cost savings, just in terms of electricity and getting out the and so on, let alone 5G. But so if any cities are interested in that, we'd like to reach out and have those conversations and approach collectively.
Great. Bob? How about on the phone? Anybody have anything to add? Any updates you want to provide the group?
Bill, this is Steve Carr. I just, the only thing I'd like to add is just in listening to the conversation this morning and hearing George's presentation, I think from a mapping perspective, I think Lewis Fox from Scenic was going to try and assist the consortium in providing some updated mapping of where Scenic anchor institutions might be. I know they're providing connectivity not only to the county office, but also to many of the libraries throughout the county. And I think throughout the cities in the county, I think it would be really helpful to kind of tie those maps that Scenic may have. I think it also may address some of the issues around redundancy and resiliency in terms of other connection points aside from One Wilshire. That was something Lewis was going to also provide us. Is that right, Bill?
Yes, you're right. Steve, it's great to hear your voice. I mean, I track you back to probably our first meeting, you know, half a dozen years ago. And you're one of our original plank holders, and I'm glad that you're comfortable dialing in even though you're not wearing the same badge you wore before.
Well, I also don't miss that drive that Bruce had to handle this morning, so
Yeah.
I'm glad not to be on the roads.
Yeah, your not being there didn't help, by the way. Not enough, anyway.
Anybody else on the phone? Okay, everybody, we'll see you at the forum.